Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software. And in today's session, we're going to cover the User and Group Administration, continuing the HIVE CMS Admin Learning Series. So HIVE and, well, all of CTC's management now is full of users, and we need to kind of manage them a bit. So the more projects you have, obviously the bigger your company grows, the more users you're going to have. And so here today, we're going to talk about how you can most easily manage all of your users in HIVE and in CTC's licensing based on user groups. As an admin, basically, you have to be an admin to be able to do any of these types of controls. Now, since HIVE's access to all the content within it is directly related to user accounts and user groups, and for that matter, CTC's licensing, the cloud shared licensing, is all based on users and user groups as well, it's really important to have a really solid understanding and a good plan for managing all those users and those user groups within the portal. You also probably don't want to have to manage each user one by one unless you're like 10 people or fewer. So we're going to talk about all the different details that are required for managing users, groups, and for that matter, a little bit touch on the libraries and license management within the portal. I'm going to be going through four major things today. I'm going to talk about how to define users. And we're going to start with just the most simplistic user by user creation. We're going to talk about the Excel-based workflow if you want to do that slightly more automated way. Or if you want to, we'll also talk about the Active Directory user control that you can use to synchronize with your Active Directory that you have today. Then we're going to talk about the user groups themselves, a bit about how to use them. We are going to outline in pretty deep detail the rights that can be assigned to users and user groups and what that means. And we're also going to talk a bit about some of that automation for both user and group creation, again, talking back to the Excel workflow as well as the Active Directory synchronization system. And as always, I'm not big on death by PowerPoint, so we're going to jump in and talk about this live within the tool set. Now, as always, CTC's webinars are recorded, so you can always come back and rewatch this later as a refresher, as a review from our YouTube channel. So we encourage you to subscribe there so you know when our recordings get put live. And also, as always, if you have questions while I'm going through the topics today, I encourage you to jump into the questions window within GoToWebinar and post them so that I can answer them for you. Now, everything that we're going to be doing today is going to be based on our web portal. In fact, I have an incorrect link here, so I'm going to go ahead and correct that real quick because the web link now is just ctcsoftware.com. That's all you have to go to. You could put the dots there if you really want to, but it's ctcsoftware.com, and you can do this from your cell phone, you can do it from a tablet, your kid's Chromebook, your desktop computer, it doesn't matter. As long as you can get on the internet, you're going to go to ctcsoftware.com. You'll be able to sign in. You'll be able to follow along with me today if you want to do this right alongside me while I'm doing this live. I'll be talking through all the settings. So first of all, let's talk about how you can define users. How do users get defined in the first place? Now, if you're a BIM manager and this is the first time you're signing in, you'll be probably the first user defined. You'll be the only user in the system. But once you're there, once the first person's there, you're probably going to want to create a few more. And so we're going to take a look at how that process works. So from ctcsoftware.com right here, you're going to go over to the little person, the little human over here to the right. And when you're signed in, you can just simply click on the little person. It'll bring you directly to the account. If you're not signed in, that little person will be hollow or not filled in. And when you go click on it, you'll be going to log in securely and putting in your credentials as an admin for this site. Now, end users can put in their credentials as well, and they'll be able to sign in, but they won't have near as much of controls that you as an admin will have. And different kinds of admins have different kinds of controls, and we'll talk more about that a little later on as we talk about kind of what those admin settings look like. But first, let's go figure out where we're going to actually be defining the end users themselves. How do we create a user account within the portal once you have an account in the first place? So to create an account or to create a new user beyond yourself, you're going to go to users and groups. In my case here, you'll notice I have a ton of users, well, 15 users specifically in my system already. If I wanted to make a brand new user, I would go over here to the little plus sign. You'll notice this theme throughout a lot of our management here. We talked in previous sessions about administering the CMS. We've talked about administering projects. We've done this a few times, and every time you want to add something new, there's a little plus sign up here at the top right of whatever this main window is. Now in users and groups, I'm specifically on the users drawer right here. There is a groups drawer. We'll be digging into that in just a moment, but right now we're on users. And if I click the plus sign, I can individually choose to add a user, one user. So if I wanted to add one, I'll add here some person, and this will be the fourth person I'm adding here. Maybe I put in here like some P4 at ctcexpresstools.com. You'll notice if I could spell that, I could get this typed in here correctly. The first name is required, the email is required, and the password down here that you assign on their behalf is required. Nothing else is required. So if you have some limitations or some rules in-house about not putting things like departments or offices or last names or whatever, that's fine, not a big deal. You can certainly go in here if you want to for the purpose of some dashboarding and metrics to understand usability by office or usability by department and input an office and department. You can give descriptions to people if you need to for understanding more, like if you have a service account internally that you want to use for something, you can describe it as such. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and put in here a password for myself. And I'm going to go ahead and create this user. Now, this is step one of user creation. And when I hit create, it's going to shut this box down. It's going to add that new user, some P, to my system. And then if I want to further edit that user, let me just go ahead and show all 25 current users. And I may have to, actually, I might have already made a some P4 inside the system, so it might not have made it. Let me just refresh here real quick and see if I get, yep, looks like some P4 has already been made. Let's try it again. Some person 5, because I think I made a 4 already in a previous discussion. expresstools.com there, and we're going to go ahead and put in the password and create them. And this time it should succeed because I don't think that one exists. There we go, 16 entries, so I got a new one. And this is what I was expecting to happen the first time had it not been a person that already existed. This pops up a message that, or a dialogue to put me immediately back into step 2. So it creates the person, closes the dialogue, comes back up, puts me into step 2 right here, and I can now choose specific roles for this user if I want to. I personally recommend not assigning any organizational level admin roles at the user level. We're going to be talking about those roles here in just a moment, but note you could assign them to the users should you really, really want to. I just don't recommend it. Here, though, if you do have groups, additional groups, you can assign groups right here to this user. If this person that I'm adding right now happens to be some kind of an admin, like an org admin, one of the people who's going to assist me while I'm administering Hive, I can certainly give them that group role. Now, we haven't made groups yet, but you know, when you're defining users, if you do have groups, you can assign them to the user. There is one group that will always exist in your organization. I've changed the name of mine. I've renamed it. Instead of just being everyone, I've put r-everyone and then put CTC in brackets after it. And I did that so it follows my current naming convention that I have in my groups. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But that group does exist automatically in your org, the everyone group, and literally everyone who you add will be in that group. Okay, so everyone's going to be in the everyone group. You can add more if you need to. And we do that because most every organization has an everyone group and creates an everyone group that you use for a lot of things. And you'll see me use this throughout other presentations where in the CMS, I'm assigning rights to libraries to everyone, or I'm assigning certain licensing to everyone. And so just having the everyone group exist and automatically be populated with every person in your firm saves a bit of headache and trouble for you. The group's already there. So in this case, I'm not going to make any changes here right now. This particular user is a daily Revit user. They're not a manager type user. So I'm just going to go ahead and update this person and close this out, and I'm done. This user is ready to go. So that some P user, some P5 is now in my list somewhere here. There it is, some person 5, some P5 is sitting right there. I didn't assign an office or a department, so they are completely unknown at this point, but they are an active user. They were created here today at this time. All right. So now that that is all set up, let's talk also about defining user groups. So I'm going to go ahead and forward the slide here, defining and using user groups. So back here in the portal, we're going to go now to the groups drawer. Within the groups drawer, I have a bunch of user groups. Most of you, when you first start, are probably going to work with 2, maybe 3 to begin with. And you might make more as time goes on, depending on what you need. Just to kind of outline what I have here, let me just show all of my user groups all at once so you can see everything. I've chosen to make a few discipline-specific groups, and you'll notice I prefix those with DI, discipline, dash whatever discipline it is. And I do this to keep things grouped together nicely because this list by default will be alphabetically grouped. It also helps me then really quickly find those groups and make choices from them when I'm assigning them to users later on. I do have one group here that's Dynamo Power Users. It doesn't have a prefix. It's just sort of its own anomaly group. But then I have a number of role-based groups. There's a role for BIM managers in my firm. I suffixed it with CTC. There's that Everyone CTC group right here. Yours will start out being named Everyone. Now I've changed my name to R Everyone, and I've suffixed with CTC, and it's also sub-suffixed there as default. Every user will go into this group by default. You can change the name to whatever you want. I also have here a license admin role, an org admin, and these will relate to other roles that exist. Now to make a group here, I'm going to go ahead and hit the little plus sign here at the top right corner. Again, just like I did for users, I'm going to make a new group. So if I wanted a new group for, I don't know, project architects. So a role for project architects. And I'm going to suffix this with my own corporate initials, just so in case in the future I make groups for users outside of my firm, and I want to put them into a subgroup, I can suffix with their corporate initials. So I can identify which group I have that's me versus some other company where I want to group people. So I like to do this just as a naming convention, but that's up to you, of course, entirely. You can give it a description if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and create this user group. It's going to generate it, and then it's going to pop me back here into the edit group, just like it does for end users when I make a user. Now here, we're going to talk more in depth about the organizational roles. From here, by the way, also, if I wanted to add myself to this group, I could type in, for example, my name, choose me, and have me added to this group when I hit update. So you can add members in just the same way. Earlier, I was adding groups to users. So the function here is identical. It doesn't matter which way you go. You can add a group to a user, or you can add a user to a group. Whichever dialog makes the most sense for you, that's up to you. But let's talk now at the group level for this project architects, talk about the organizational level roles that might apply here and what they each mean. So I'm going to transition into outlining rights for the actual groups themselves. All right. So here, there's one master level role here at the far left. It's called Organization Admin. If you choose that, what you'll notice, if you look very carefully here, all the rest of these roles, they gray out and they're kind of unavailable because it's unnecessary to check them when you're checking the Organization Admin. So if I uncheck it, you'll notice that they kind of highlight out a bit. They kind of turn to the same color as this. And when I check it, they kind of gray out, because this is sort of the God level rights across the entirety of the system. My user that I'm signed in as today has an organization admin level role, which gives me access to absolutely everything in the system. Now, for this particular group, these project architects, I probably don't want them to have that level of role. And so I'm not going to check the organization admin. The next one down here, CMS admin, gives admin level rights across everything that is the HIVE CMS, the content management system for HIVE. So if I check that, that would give this user group, whoever's in this group, full God level rights across the CMS, the ability to make libraries, tags, administer who can get access to which libraries. That's what the CMS admin level does. Again, org admin has all these rights. So when I'm describing this, the org admin's got God level rights across all of it. There's one sub-role inside of here, which is CMS tag admin. Within the CMS tab, there's the ability to assign tags and create and administer the tags. And some companies want a group of people to just be able to administer the tags, but not be able to administer the entirety of the CMS organization. And so you can choose to assign tag administration to a group of people if you want to. In this case, that's not what I'm looking for with this project architects group either. Within the HIVE system, there's also projects, logical projects, which you can organize and create your projects and assign your Revit project models to a project, a logical project, and then eventually view that information in the dashboard over here. And to be able to do all of that administration within the projects, you would need a project administration level role, which for this group of people is probably what I want, given that this is a project architect group. They're probably going to be building their own projects, and maybe I want them to do some of that administration, so I can go ahead and give them those roles. Now, if I didn't want them to have the roles, but I want them visibility on projects, I could still make a group for them and put all my project architects into a specific group. And then while I may not give them organizational level roles, within the projects area, I may give them visibility to all of the projects as users of the project. So might be something I might be interested in. There's also the ability to do user administration, which is effectively what we're talking about today, users and groups administration. Some companies will give that level of role to their IT teams. They might make a group of people that's IT, that's user administrators. They can go in and do all the administration of users, but perhaps not do other administration within the system. That's up to you if you want to do that. There's also purchasing admins, the ability to actually leverage and purchase items in the shopping cart, update the number of licenses, change your corporate billing information if you want to. That is a purchasing administrator. We do have some accounting companies with accounting groups that are having them be set up as purchasing admins. The next one here, license admin in line. This allows the allocation of licensing. They can use the users and groups that you set up, and they can allocate them to licensing. They can control if licensing auto-renews and things like that. That is a licensing admin. HIVE has a built-in request system here, HIVE Requests. You can actually get access to it through the HIVE CMS and the Add Request button right here. To be able to administer those requests, you can assign a specific team of people to be a request admin. This might be support team members on your teams. A lot of the times I see BIM managers be assigned request admin, as well as HIVE CMS admins and potentially user admins and maybe licensing admins and probably supporting admins. So while I may not have them be full organization admins, I may not want them making purchasing decisions, my BIM managers could potentially have the vast majority of the rights relevant to them. So you can mix and match these if you need to as well. And finally here, support administrators. These are the ones who are able to interact with the support tab over here and control whether end users can interact with the support system that directly sends support questions to CTC. So in this case, with this group that I'm particularly making right now, which is the project architects, I'm going to go ahead and make them project administrators and update this group. So when I do that now, I'll have a new group here, the R project architects. I have a total of 13 groups. In this case, if I show all of my groups, show 25 entries at a time, which will definitely cover that. I may have a project managers group, but also a project architects group. And so you can mix and match how you set these up You can see I've got a role for each of the major roles, and I just put people in that group, whatever one is relevant for them, and then that gives them the proper org level roles. Or in the case of the everyone group, I use this particular group has no organizational level roles or rights as admins, but I do use this group a lot when I assign rights to libraries and CMS, to projects, and into the licensing allocation. All right. So that's kind of talking a bit about the rights that we have going on here. Let's also talk a little bit about automating some of this management, because so far, what you've seen me do is manually go to users and create a user directly here, one by one. Click the button, put in a first name, email, basic password, maybe allocate them to a group or two, and then go on to the next user. And I do that over and over. Now, if I've got 20, 30, 50, 120, 6,000 people, I don't want to be doing that manually over and over again, right? So there's a more efficient way. Similarly here with the user groups, there might be a more efficient way to create and to administer who is in which group instead of manually going to the group and administering it one by one. One of the most used ways for administering groups of users and users themselves is to simply use our Excel workflow, the XLSX file export, which will send you an email with a list of all of the users in your company and all of the user groups and all of their associations. And then you can manipulate that directly in Excel and turn right back around and republish that or import that modified Excel file right back inside of the Hive system, inside the portal here. That's one way of doing automated management. So let's kind of go through the workflow here. I'm going to go ahead and click the download list of users. It tells me here that an Excel file with my user data will be emailed to me shortly, and that will just simply appear inside of my email system whenever it's ready. Usually takes maybe about 60 seconds for me because I've got a fairly small company here of a few users. In fact, it's already there. So I can simply download that. It's going to download in a different browser. I'll just kind of pull this across so you can see it. Maybe I drop this into my downloads folder right there, and I'll save this users and groups list directly. Now, my web browser is going to automatically let me pop that open once it's done and open me up, in my case, into Excel, because that's where this particular file gets managed. I'm going to go ahead and enable editing here, and you'll see that I have Hive Groups, which is a sortable group list if you wanted to sort by things or filter things. You could change descriptions en masse here if you wanted to. You can see within the Hive system what the group ID is. Don't touch that. That'll screw things up for your organization. This is kind of baked in so that Hive knows if you make changes to this, which one you're actually changing, especially if you're changing the group name. Now, I can't stop you from making changes. It's just Excel, but I recommend you don't do that. Similarly here with the Hive users, this will export all Hive users, and what I typically will do is simply filter for those that are actually active. This will be the 15 or 16 users that I have in my company that are active users. There's plenty of people who have left the firm or transitioned out of using Hive, and so I've disabled their user in the Hive system. When you export that list of users, it will give you all of them, and you can manipulate them if you want to. But in this case, I really only care to work with those that are actually active users. Again, it will show me their Hive user ID, which might be useful later on in some of the metrics you might run. Shows me their email address. If you need to update that for some reason, you certainly can. First and last name, the description, all those same fields that we were working with before. And also what groups they're associated to, which by default, everyone will be in the everyone group here. And I might comma separate and add them to a few other groups if I wanted to. So if I wanted to make a new user, let's just say I wanted to add some P6. So we'll just go ahead and put in some P6 here at ctcexpresstools.com. One thing you might notice about this is that there is no need to put in a password like there was before. So I'm going to put in some person 6. And I could give them some description if I want to, tell them they're going to be a part of everyone. And maybe this guy happens to be like a project manager. So I can simply go find up here one of the ones that's called Project Manager, or go over to my Hive groups and grab Project Manager right here and just copy the group name. And then I can use that group name over here for this user. Now I like to put in the everyone group just to make sure that this person has that. It's not necessary, they'll be added to it anyway, but then I comma separate this and put in my project managers as well. I could add a whole bunch of people, just get a big old list of people, add all of them. They'll automatically be put into everyone, whether I do it here or not, but I could then allocate whatever extra user groups it is I want. And ultimately, when I'm all done, I can save this file and then turn right back around. And instead of having to manually add users one by one and manually entering a password one by one, I can simply republish that spreadsheet directly. So here's my users and groups that I've just modified. Simply import that right back in, and it'll go through the exercise of building that user for me for user 6, some person 6 rather, and it will also assign them to whatever that user group happens to be when the time comes. If I refresh here, now it might take it a minute or two to finish that whole process, but it will eventually build that user and it will put them in that user group eventually. All right. I'll stop refreshing this for now. We'll come back to that perhaps later. There is another way of automating the management of users. Now, to talk about this one, I'm going to have to actually stop the PowerPoint for a minute, because on my desktop, there's a tool that I can use to make this more efficient, but I can't show that tool when the PowerPoint's open. So give me just a moment here as I kill the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to minimize all this down to my desktop. And out here, when you download Hive, the program, there's an optional installer that you can use. It's called the Active Directory Synchronizer, or CTC Accounts Active Directory Synchronizer. What this tool will let you do is it will let you tie into your company's current Active Directory. Now, I haven't signed in for a while, so it's going to make me sign in now. Shanzi at expresstools.com. And my password here, and sign in. So I did enter my password, I thought. Did I not type everything right? It's probable that I didn't type everything right. Try again. There we go. Now I typed it right. I didn't mess it up this time. With this particular tool, I can browse my Active Directory user groups here. And so if I was to go into, let me just go into my little demo subset here and go into like my my demo security groups, you know, by office or whatever, right? If I wanted to grab a couple of these user groups and add them to my list to bring them in, these user groups themselves will be defined in Hive as a user group. And when I add these groups, all of the users within those user groups will also be added into Hive and directly associated to my Active Directory user groups. So for those of you with slightly larger companies and a bit more management at play, you can certainly leverage the Active Directory Account Synchronizer to automatically bring your users in and automatically create user groups. Now, if you're going to do that, if you're going to go through that exercise, that's totally fine. Go for it. But then you probably won't be spending a ton of time in the portal outlining all of your user groups and making assignments of rights here yet. You'll probably do the Active Directory account synchronization, get your user groups brought in the first place, and then go through and allocate extra rights within the Hive system to give certain BIM manager style or project manager style heightened rights within specific groups. Because those groups will be made, the users will automatically be in the right groups, and in the future, when people get added to your company and removed from your company, and IT adds and removes users from those user groups, that will automatically do administration then within Hive as well, because you can schedule the synchronization of the CTC accounts Active Directory system here, so it runs like once a week, once a day if you really want to. Once a week is typically what most people will do, maybe once a month, whatever you want to have those users automatically generated. And of course, you could do it on demand as well. So ultimately, when I want this to publish, if I wanted these users and user groups to be added to my system, I would click the Publish to CTC Accounts. Now, I don't want that today, so I'm not going to publish this like I did with the Excel file. Adding that one user wasn't a big deal, but I don't want all these users and user groups in my system. So I'm not going to do that. But you can use the Active Directory account synchronizer to further automatically administer your users in this environment. All right, let me just restart this here. So that's a lot of the ways in which you can do administration within Hive users and user groups. So with that, we're going to jump here into a questions and answers session here in just a moment. So if you have questions, go ahead and start writing them up in the questions window if you haven't already answered them or asked them. I don't see any in there just yet. But I do want to say thank you to those of you who aren't going to hang out for the Q&A session. We know some of you have tight time schedules and you're going to jump out right now. That's fine. Thank you for attending. We always enjoy seeing you live here in our webinars. Certainly sign up for future CTC webinars from our page, ctcsoftware.com. And you can also be notified when these webinar recordings go live to our YouTube channel by going to the YouTube channel and subscribing to it. But with that, let's jump into the Q&A session here and see if any of you happen to have any questions related to user and group management within the Hive system or CTC licensing system. I'm not seeing any questions roll through just yet. There is a question rolling through. So is there a YouTube video or some other published guide for how to transition to the online management? I'm assuming you mean license management. So the answer is yes, we have some documentation around that. You can certainly contact us or your reseller directly to talk about what that transition looks like, because you'll need to first off transition or indicate that you want to transition to cloud shared licensing so that gets allocated that way. Right now, what we're doing is we are hand coaching you through the process, which looks a lot like what we just did today, other than the allocation of licenses through the licensing system. But very soon here, if you look at our events page, you'll see a webinar coming out that is the license management for that online system that you'll be able to refer back to whenever. It's going to look a lot like today's user and group management, but then also we'll talk about the license management side over there. All right. There was another question that popped up that was talking about renaming groups. How is that done? Like, how do I rename a group? And that's a really good question. I didn't talk about the editing of groups once they were created here, but to edit anything, whether it be a user or a group, you simply hit the little pencil here, like my Everyone group right there, the one that's the default group. If I click the little pencil sign in front of it, I can go in here and change the name of that group. I can change its description. I can choose which users and roles this particular group happens to have. Similarly here on my BIM Manager group right there, if yours is called BIM Manager and you want to change its name, you should be able to just hit the pencil button right here, and then that'll pop up the edit window for it. So you can change this to just be BIM Manager or R-BIM Manager or whatever. Like this name is editable right here. Ultimately, if this group is being controlled by the Active Directory account synchronization, then you will not be able to edit that group name. That will be uneditable to you, and you will have to change the group name from Windows directly in your Active Directory management so that when it synchronizes back in the next time, that group name would update. But if it was created directly here inside of Hive, you would simply hit the pencil button and then make a change, and you should be good to go. If you do experience some issues with that, certainly feel free to reach out to our support, and we'll be more than happy to answer a bit more about that particular workflow. And you can contact us through support using the Contact Support button right here at the top of the ctcsoftware.com page. I'm not seeing any other questions roll through at the moment, so as such, we're going to go ahead and close this out today. Once again, thank you. We always do appreciate when you show up live and interact with us. It keeps it interesting to us, hopefully more interesting for you as well. And we do look forward to seeing you in future CTC webinars. Have a fantastic day.